Okay, so we've looked at Burma, people and places, and we've got a sense of how diverse that area of Southeast Asia is. When you have so many different groups of people living close together, you can imagine that their political history is going to be pretty complex. And so that's what we're going to look at right now. Everybody's favorite game show, Burmese Pre-Modern Political History.
Pre-modern Burmese political history.
In actuality, we're not going to play this game in a lot of detail because it's complex, and in the time we have here, we've just got to basically sketch an outline. So I mentioned before that in the southern part of what is today Myanmar/Burma are historically lived a people known as the Mon. At some point in the first millennium AD, the Mon, came in contact with Buddhism and started to practice that religion. Then somewhere around 1000 AD, or a little bit before that, the people who we refer to as the Burmans had migrated into the area of what is today the northern half of Burma. And they came in contact with people who practiced Buddhism, some of whom must have been Mon, and they began to practice that religion as well. And Buddhism became, something shared among those two peoples. Roughly around that time, or a little bit later, in the 11th century, there was some people who established a large-scale Burman empire in that northern half of the land. Prior to that point, there'd probably been a smaller-scale kingdom, but in the 11th century, there's a ruler by the name of Anarata who expanded that kingdom and established, essentially what became an empire that is known as Bagan. So, like I said, the Burmans, came into contact with Buddhism. They started to practice it, and Buddhism became essentially the official religion or ideology of this empire of Bagan. And over the next couple centuries, the inhabitants of that kingdom went totally into high speed, high gear, high energy, and built Buddhist temples like there's no tomorrow. Literally, in something like 200 years, they built something like 10,000 Buddhist temples. Today, if you visit Bagan, there's only a fraction of that number still standing. I think it's somewhere around 2,000 are still there today. But if you view Bagan from some elevated position, such as the top of a temple, or people go up in balloons sometimes, and you look towards the horizon, what you see is just temple, 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 temple. They're everywhere. And so today, it is still just astonishing to see, but you can only, imagine what it must have been like roughly, 800 years ago or so, when there were many more temples standing there. Just absolutely incredible. So Bagan was an amazing place, but it fell on hard times. In the 13th century, there's a group of people who came to power in China, the Mongols. Who, of course, went on to create an entire world empire. And Burma was one of the places where they tried to expand their influence. And they did this by attacking the area, something that they did first in 1277, but I think in 1287 they really trashed Bagan, and that was essentially the end of that empire. Then in the next part, things get really complex. And if we were playing a game show here, this is when we test people's knowledge of the political history of pre-modern Burma, because there's all kinds of kingdoms that rise and fall and compete for power. But ultimately, there's a couple that enjoy a bit more longevity and that become larger in scale. And one is known as the Taungu dynasty, which was formed in the 1500s. I think it's right around the middle. Yeah, I got to keep checking the dates. I don't know this stuff. I mean, kind of, but like, would I know that one? Centuries I can do. Yeah, you know, I know 1500s. Half centuries a lot of the time. I'd probably know that one. I mean, kind of. The 1500s, but this is, I feel like it's like 1540 or something like that, that the Taungu dynasty, which was also based in the northern half of what is today Myanmar, was established and expanded. And there were a 2, there were a 2, there were a 1, a 2, there were a 2. There were a couple of 2 rulers at the beginning of this dynasty who really kicked ass. A guy by the name of Taban Shueti. Another one by the name of Bayanang. And these guys, you know, went out, they saw, they conquered, weenie weenie weechi, Burmese style, something like that. They really, you know, worked hard to expand the kingdom. And how do you do that? Well, you do it by going and kicking ass on people. And that's what they did. But in this world of pre-modern Southeast Asia, and particularly the pre-modern mainland, there's something a little bit unique about how this happened. So if you were someone like the Taungu, who you're trying to establish a dynasty, one of the things you do is you'd go off and you'd beat up on neighboring kingdoms, in part because you'd want to capture people and bring them back to your capital, but also to bring that kingdom under your authority. And the way people would do this would not be by eliminating that kingdom and putting their own people in power there, but basically, you know, giving the kingdom a good beating and then leaving, in many cases, the local rulers in place, or perhaps, you know, putting on the throne some member of your family, but often leaving the local rulers in place and demanding that they, you know, pledge allegiance to you and, you know, provide support in times of warfare. Now, where this got really complex is that as part of these deals, some of these, you know, surrounding kingdoms would then fight for the big kingdom in the middle, like Taungu. And so, for instance, you know, Taungu might go off and subdue Lanna, a kingdom in the area of what is today Chiang Mai in northern Thailand. And then they would order, you know, the ruler of Lanna to lead troops to conquer another place on behalf of the Taungu, and to bring that place into submission, and to bring people from that kingdom back to the capital. Something that might have looked something like this.
Wangมือ เลิกปราศาสนากันได้แล้ว ข้าและชาวเมืองคังทั้งปวง ขอยอมสิโรราบ ต่อสมเด็จพระนเรศ เจ้าฟ้าเมืองพิษณุโลกสองแควขออย่าได้เข็นฆ่าให้เสียเลือดเสียเนื้อและชีวิตต่อกันอีกเลย
ทหารไปเอาน้ำมาถวายสมเด็จเจ้าฟ้าให้ใครกระหายบัดเดียวนี้ เจ้าหาได้ยินคำข้าหรือไปหาน้ำมาถวายสมเด็จเจ้าฟ้าอย่าช้าที
เกิดเหตุอันใดขึ้น
พวกเจ้ากระทำเยี่ยงนี้กับเจ้าฟ้าเจ้าแผ่นดินหรือพวกเจ้าทำประหนึ่งว่าสมเด็จเจ้าฟ้าท่านเป็น
เฉลยจะประสงค์สิ่งใดเล่า
ข้าเพียงขอน้ำสักจอกให้พระบิดาข้าได้คลายกระหายเท่านั้น
แล้วเจ้าล่ะยังมีการอันใดให้ข้าช่วยอีก
เมินเสียเถิดที่ข้ามีหวังพึ่งศัตรู
ศึกสิ้นสุดแล้วเราหาได้เป็นศัตรูกันอีกแล้ว
แล้วเหตุใดหรือข้าจึงถูกใส่คือคานโยงไปประหนึ่งสัตว์ที่ถูกนำไปประหาร
So that's pretty wild, and but that's really what it was like, and which makes our kind of our modern world of these nation states that are divided. We're Thai, we're Burmese, we're Vietnamese. It was a lot more fuzzy back in those days, as there was this much more just a world of ruling families who kind of manipulated each other for their own purposes. So this Taungu dynasty was powerful, particularly under these first two kings. But after that, there was a period when it kind of fell apart. Then it got its power again. It's got a jive going. It's got its something going. I don't know what I'm talking about. It got its back going. It expanded again. And sometimes people refer to as the restored Taungu dynasty that again, became powerful in the 1600s into the 1700s, where again, this one fell on hard times. And, none of these people ever disappeared. The Mon had a kingdom called Hantawadi. And, that lasted for a while. Then it, I think, got conquered. But in the 1700s, the Hantawadi came back and beat up on the Taungu and brought it to an end. So again, if we were doing a Burmese pre-modern political history game show, this is all stuff you'd be tested on. So head over to Wikipedia and get going, because we might do this at some point. Finally, though, there was in the mid-1700s, I think around 1752, a new dynasty was established in the north, a dynasty known as the Konbaung dynasty. And it was founded by a guy by the name of Alangpaya, who came to power by doing the same things, going out, beating up on neighboring kingdoms, bringing people back to the capital, and constituting a new empire that was the one that was in power in the 19th century when I say modern history really begins. So the Konbaung had their capital moved around a little bit. Different rulers established the capital at different places, but for quite a few of that period, it was at a place called, depends how you call it. In Western historical sources, it was often referred to as Ava. I think in Burmese, it's Inwa, but it's in the northern part of what is today Myanmar, Burma. God, all these confusing names. Ava, Inwa, Burma, Myanmar, tomato.
You say Ava, and I say Inwa. You say tomato, and I say tomato. Ava, Inwa, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off. You say Myanmar, and I say Burma. You say Bangkok, and I say Grung Thep. Myanmar, Burma, Bangkok, Grung Thep. Let's call it all off, baby. Here we go.